But before we explore this young generation, we pause to pay tribute to one of the most prominent figures in Detroit's history. His name, Reverend C.L. Franklin. He was a leader in religion, civil rights, and politics. His musical legacy spawned the career of his famous daughter, Aretha Franklin. The Detroit-based minister was known nationally for his rousing and eloquent sermons. His most famous, "The Eagle Stirreth Her Nest," describes God as an eagle challenging man to make man better. Reverend Franklin's life of service answered that challenge.
He was one of the world's greatest preachers of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Some of the members of his church that were very talented and could sing, they traveled with him as he went across the country preaching.
He was a great singer himself.
Pastor Franklin came up with Christian parents, but he had to sort of work his way up. And I think he knew the hardship. He knew what he wanted for his people, and he was willing to fight for that. He loved people, but especially was he concerned about the less fortunate.
C.L. Franklin gave you a chance. I was speaking in this pulpit as a member of Dr. King's staff before I was ordained. And thus Irma and Cecil and Carolyn and Aretha, we're family. After years of splendid service and 5 years of silent suffering, God called Clarence LeVon Franklin, and he asked him, the high priest of soul preaching, affectionately called the rabbi, the learned one.
Reverend Franklin was an institution all within himself. He had the ability to preach himself out of any problem. He was what they call a hoopla. He had a hoop, and it was a rhythm type speaking voice, and he just had the ability. He was a great biblical historian.
He was an artist. When he would give a sermon, you could see the sermon. You could see the people walking.
He was the one preacher that preachers went to hear preach.
And as a boy, I was very inspired by him.
I know he inspired a lot of young men. If they had it within them, he helped to bring it out. I believe that, yeah, because he was an idol of many of us, I'll say.
C.L. Franklin, the most imitated soul preacher in history. A combination of soul and science and substance and sweetness.
If you listen to the black preachers across the country in the last 25, 30 years, most of them have a little C.L. Franklin in them.
There was a little bit of Frank in all of us.
There's a little C.L. Franklin in our throats if we have that talent, or in our hearts if we're possessed with the urge to preach. He challenged the church to be relevant and asked the Lord to give us this day our daily bread.
Years ago, when Reverend Franklin came along, people were all Baptist folk were talking about dying. They were talking about going to heaven and all that, but Reverend Franklin talked about life. And he was concerned about the sinner, the man who was making the mistake. And his constant reminder was that God would save those who had sinned, who had made mistakes, and there was a place for them.
We used to sometimes ask him after the church got to be very big and very prominent across the country, you know, why didn't he move in a better location. And he would say because the location that he was in was where he was needed most.
You mean the broadcast? I wouldn't have missed many Sunday nights. And, you know, that would be crowds there.
Having a broadcast, which he had for many years, and was at a time when most of us was out of our church services, and many of us would go down there to be with him.
On that plateau, he shared his broader ministry. Before many would allow an organ or piano in their church, calling them instruments of sin, C.O. saw the music industry.
I was quite young at the time, but I had a chance to meet him as he did travel with groups, gospel groups. For not only did he help a lot of preachers, but he helped a lot of singers.
It is out of this boom and web that Aretha Franklin was spawned. She was no accident, rather product of providence. The acorn does not fall far from the tree.
Aretha is a natural piano player also, and which my mother was too. And so I think the combination of my father and my mother produced Aretha to what she is today.
C.O. Franklin was born in 1915, 40 years after slavery, and 60 years before we had the right to vote. Born in poverty, poverty could not stop him.
My father, in his early life, worked hard. He struggled. He had a very difficult childhood. He told me that going back to the age of 14, I think it was, that he was somewhat of an itinerant minister then. But also, he worked on the farm at home. And he left one Saturday night going somewhere in Mississippi to preach, and arrived back to the farm about an hour and a half late that Monday morning to go in the field. And his father asked him then to make the decision whether he was going to preach or whether he was going to plow. And he said, with a pair of overalls on, 1 quarter in my pocket, and 1 green suit, I made the decision to preach. And I turned around and walked away, and from that day on, the Lord made a way.
They met when my father went to preach at a church about 30 miles from his home. And she was the organist, so she was already into church-related activities. And he told me once that, you know, he just looked at her and that was it, you know, and I guess it was a mutual thing. And so they got married.
Daddy was a father and a mother to us after our mother passed in 1952.
As I think about it now, it must have been, you know, very difficult for him because there were 4 of us. And we were not the world's most disciplined kids. So he was constantly on us about something.
All that a father could be, he was. That's about all I can say. Everything that you would want from a father, he was, and so much so that I still feel that I get direction from him right now. Because I'm constantly remembering things that he said to me and things that he instilled in me.
I have a dream this afternoon that the brotherhood of man will become a reality in this day. He was a guiding force in the historic civil rights movement in 1963. He helped to lead the March on Detroit, which preceded the March on Washington. The record shows him locked arms with Dr. King in that march.
And that was where Martin really gave the first speech of I Have a Dream. Reverend Franklin spearheaded that. And just like you get a brainstorm, an idea, And he started calling people around on the phone. They started responding.
It was just a happening. It was the talk of the town, and everybody was saying, are you going to be at the march? And everybody was answering yes, you know.
Everyone left church and went right to the Woodward Avenue, and it was well organized there. We all lined up at various side streets, and as the line would come out, you would just fall right in line from where you were.
As it continued, and the speeches were held later on down in Cobo Hall after the march, and you listened to the speakers, you found out really what you were a part of.